Boris Johnson has won his vote of confidence with 211 votes for him and 148 against. So the Conservative Party is deeply split.
I think this is a very good result for politics and for the country.
This is a catastrophic result for the country. I'll come on to that in a second, but a very good one, of course, for the opposition, because we're going to see more bumps, scrapes and crises ahead as this government slithers in a kind of zigzag downward cartwheel towards oblivion, he said. Not really oblivion, but certainly electoral failure. We're going to see the Commons Committee looking at whether or not he lied to the Parliament.
But I'm sure that whatever happened, the guidance was followed and the rules were followed at all times.
The Prime Minister misled the House. That is a resignation issue.
We're going to see at least 2 by-elections where I suspect the Conservatives will do very badly, and we're going to see Tory MPs staring in horror as their putative majorities vanish. It's a relatively easy gig for the opposition to simply point at this government and say, look at them.
Conservative MPs made their choice tonight. They have ignored the British public and hitched themselves and their party firmly to Boris Johnson and everything that he represents.
But it's really bad for the country, this, because Boris Johnson has effectively lost his parliamentary majority to do anything decisive or clear. We know that we face very, very severe economic problems. We know that there's a whole range of areas right across public life where there's simply not enough money and things are decaying. And we need a clear, decisive government in place to help get us through this. Now, this cannot be the Conservatives at the moment. We have the pro-Boris party, as it were, the pro-Brexit Boris populist Conservative group, the 211, and they are the placeholders, some of them voting that way because they think nobody else would put them into the cabinet or wherever, and lots of Tory MPs who think, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Boris Johnson, and a few ideologues and very hardcore Brexiters, and so on. But they don't have a majority. 211 does not a parliamentary majority make. And then on the other hand, we've got the kind of rather chaotic, disorganised group of anti-Boris Johnson Conservatives of all kinds, from all wings of the party, 148 of those, and of course they don't have a majority either. In fact, we're in the very, very strange position where the single biggest parliamentary bloc that is coherent and votes clearly together is now the Labour Party. Except, of course, they don't have a majority either. So we are really stuck.
And what we need to do now is come together as a government, as a party, and that is exactly what we can now do.
So Boris Johnson is already burbling about new, decisive, conservative measures to reunite the party, in particular tax cuts. Tax cuts. This comes just a couple of weeks after his Chancellor did an enormous U-turn to raise a windfall tax on the Labour model. If he really wants tax cuts at a time when every part of the public services and public life is crying out for more money, where is he going to make the cuts? And then if you look at the other measures that he's been talking about, they are so relatively trivial. The return of imperial measures, pounds and furlongs and miles and all the rest of it. I almost thought they would be waving from a bus during the Jubilee celebrations. This great sort of return of traditional Tory values, the kind of thing that's going to get the Express and the Mail overexcited. I'm not sure what's left in the bag or at the bottom of the cupboard. Is it going to be compulsory claret-coloured corduroys for all county towns? Is it going to be the return of the ducking stool or the abolition of the Factory Acts? There's very little left there. And so I suspect what's going to happen is a series of ineffectual populist measures combined with bigger measures which can't get through the House of Commons.
We're going to go through a continuing difficult time because of the inflationary pressures that the world is experiencing, but we have a lot of natural strength.
I think the closest political parallel to the situation we're in now is actually in 1978, when Jim Callaghan's Labour government at the fag end of that Keynesian, old Labour, consensual worldview had run out of steam. We had huge amounts of industrial action, we had inflation, we had very high unemployment, which we don't have now. But there's a general sense that the economic headwinds facing the country were simply too big for this particular government, which then had no parliamentary majority, as I say, rather like Boris Johnson now, to cope with. And we knew a big change was coming. There was a sense of the dam is going to break, we're going to go in a new direction. And of course, the new direction then was Margaret Thatcher. And you couldn't say now, I don't think, that the opposition has the kind of clarity and steely resolve and philosophical direction that the Conservatives did in 1978. Nonetheless, we think a big change is coming. The point is, this week was supposed to be, for the Conservatives, when the boil was lanced. But the boil has refused, and the lancet has broken. This was supposed to be the period, remember, in which the British economy was unshackled and leapt forward because of Brexit. Now, it's very early days. We haven't had a lot of evidence, and we've had the pandemic and the war and so forth. But the evidence that we have had is that, in fact, Brexit has been a restraining, constipating force on change in the British economy and hasn't worked in that way. And because of that, there has not been a large amount of public money and the energy to spend on levelling up in the Northern and Midlands English constituencies, the other part of Boris Johnson's agenda. So if Brexit is failing to deliver what he promised, and if levelling up is still not happening, then really what is Boris Johnson for, I suppose, is my point. I do feel that because of Partygate, because of those deceits and the lies, the House of Commons and all the rest of it, and because of the feeling among conservative middle England, this guy has let them down. The country has turned against Boris Johnson and the Boris Johnson era in what I feel, I may very well be wrong, but I feel is an irreversible way.